Welcome to the Politics Chicks podcast. I'm Christy Branham.
And I'm Monica Healy.
Today, we're joined by Bob Branham, a national leader in environmental sustainability with decades of experience working on food waste mitigation and hunger relief. Quick disclaimer before we start. Today's guest shares my last name. That's because Bob is my brother-in-law, meaning he has been a Branham far longer than I have. So if this interview goes poorly, it's going to make the next family get-together pretty awkward. Bob spent much of his career helping build collaborative systems that moved food from farms and producers to communities that need it, reducing waste while strengthening food security. From 2013 to 2020, he served as director of produce strategy at Second Harvest Heartland, where he led the organization's national produce sourcing strategy.
During that time, produce distribution more than doubled, from 23 million pounds to 50 million pounds annually, helping ensure that fresh fruits and vegetables made up half of all food distributed through the network. Bob also founded the Midwest Region Produce Cooperative, which brought together 15 food banks from across 8 states to expand consistent access to healthy food. Bob retired in 2021 and now lives in Eden Prairie, where he spends time with his 7 grandchildren and volunteers at his local food shelf. Bob has remained very active in the community, especially when it comes to supporting locally owned businesses from across the Twin Cities. Recently, he's been raising awareness about the ripple effects ICE enforcement actions have had on immigrant-owned businesses in our area. Bob, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, guys. What a treat and honor. Thanks for inviting me in.
Hey, brother-in-law. Thanks for saying
Hey,
yes. I appreciate it. I had to call it a family favor.
Yeah, no, it's quite a treat to get a chance to talk to couple of folks that are deep in this and trying to figure out how we can make improvements in the community. You guys are starting a podcast, and we're all doing a little bit.
Exactly.
Like we do now.
Exactly.
Trying to do our part. Yep.
Trying to do our part. Exactly.
Yeah. So, Bob, you spent decades working on food waste and hunger relief. And one of the things people may not realize is that the United States actually produces more than enough food to feed everyone. The problem is distribution. Can you explain how that system works and where it tends to break down?
Yeah, broadly, there is more than enough food produced to feed every American in the country. But because we are rightly a capital-based system, there is a cost associated with all aspects of the food chain, from the feed of the farmers, the seeds and all the inputs that farmers have to go through, to having to pay on the back end refrigeration at grocery stores to keep that produce and those groceries safe and good and tasty for all of us. So it's an enormous expense throughout the whole process. The issue that I was dealing with when I started down the road of what we called sustainability at General Mills, which turned into food waste mitigation, was there's a staggering amount of waste in the entire supply chain. And that also starts at the farmer, who makes selective harvests based on a lot of times the aesthetics of product as opposed to the quality of product. So a great example of that is out in California, where 50% of lettuce crops are left in the field because they are the wrong size or the wrong color, or the outside leaves maybe have a little bit of mold on them. All that product is great and can easily be turned into food for the consumer, but because that takes time and a little bit of extra costs, that is left in the fields. And that's one of literally hundreds of crops that farmers have to deal with. So anyway, long story short, there is plenty of food to go around, but our system is set up in a way for a lot of very good reasons that we just still have way too many hungry people in this country.
Wow.
You helped lead a huge shift at Second Harvest Heartland that dramatically increased access to fresh produce. And why was that such an important change, and what did it take to build those networks?
Well, part of the challenge for food banks and food shelves in the country is they'll get a lot of donations of shelf-stable product. which is wonderful and necessary and incredibly helpful. But shelf stable product isn't necessarily the healthiest or the best tasting. And so when I was at General Mills, I had led an initiative in the industry around food waste mitigation. And I started to work with Feeding America, the parent organization of food banks in the United States, and other food banks as well before I joined Second Harvest. So I left General Mills now 15 or so, 14 years ago, and
Has
went
it
to
been
work.
that long? That
Yeah,
is
went to
insane.
work for Second Harvest under the premise that I would start an organization within an organization, and that would be basically let's find ways at Second Harvest of bringing in some of this wasted agriculture to help Minnesota families and Twin Cities families, and then the food shelves that Second Harvest Heartland supplies. But at the same time, work with food banks around the country in other parts of the ecosystem where they might have different crops or no crops at all, and to find out, hey, how can we share organizationally learnings and then also food, and so we would work with food banks, for example, out in Washington State, where they had no shortage of a supply of donations of apples. But and while we do grow apples here, we get donations from apple orchards here. It's not nearly the quantities that we can use to support families in Minnesota in the Twin Cities. So part of the whole premise was let's build up produce capture and agricultural rescue in the food bank system, and then take all that learning and just get that learning out. How do we go about doing that? How do you work with local farmers to get to food that isn't necessarily or isn't been harvested or has been harvested and isn't aesthetically to the standards of size or color or shape that would otherwise go to a pig farmer for feed, or worse and very commonly dumped out in the field.
Wow. And food shelves used to be thought of mostly as places as that people went to during short-term emergencies, right?
Yeah.
But what
Yeah.
what we're seeing now is something different. More families are relying on them long term. And what are you seeing on the ground right now as you're
So
volunteering?
at the local food shelf that I volunteer at, there is and has been for a decade, just this steady growth of families that need support. COVID really decimated the ability for people to work, to have steady income, to pay their rent. And so food shelves, which are the distribution points for helping people in the community. The food banks like Second Harvest are the wholesalers, and they provide the food then to the food shelves. So the food shelves saw a doubling and a tripling of demand. And by that, I mean consumer demand in the old General Mills vernacular for please help me get more food to my kids and more nutritious food to my kids. And so since that time, while we got out of the COVID crisis, the hunger crisis has not abated, and that we continue to see more families coming in. Some are short term, fortunately. Right now, in the current environment with our migrant community, or legal or illegal, irrelevant, they are afraid to go out. They're afraid to work, and now their challenge is paying rent on top of getting food. So now a food shelf like the one I volunteer at has to open up its thinking around how do we creatively help with rent and with food and with non-food and with what things can the hunger relief community do to help broader set of issues that have been created in the last year, and that too shall pass. But hunger won't. It's just part of who we are as a culture, and who we have, what we have set up economically in this country. So this will be a permanent, in my mind. There won't be a solve to hunger. There will always be a need. The challenge is going to be, how do we continue to supply nutritious food to families to that just need it, whether it's in the very shortest of term. I have family members that have had that situation, or that are longer term. I'll take a beat here for a second and just flip over to a different part of that hunger issue, which is, it isn't necessarily calories, it's nutrition, right? You can be overweight from overeating, but have really poor health because all the calories are empty, because fast food is incredibly cheap and just bad, especially when you are looking at, which breaks all of our hearts, when you see families out there and their kids, while seemingly healthy and thriving, partly because they're getting some calories in them, aren't necessarily getting the right ones to help them develop brain development, body development, and all of that. So it isn't just hunger relief. It's also nutritional concerns that food banks and food shelves have to worry about.
It's a pretty sobering thought that you view hunger as kind of a permanent issue, despite the fact that our country produces enough to feed
Yeah,
our entire country. That's kind of depressing.
it's not unlike the medical crisis. We know how to take care of everyone, right? We just choose not to. For a library could be filled with reasons that could explain the situation we're in. We have a broken medical system. We have an incredibly broken food system. People that have some means generally don't think about it, don't have to worry about it. They can go out to Trader Joe's and buy some treats if they want to, or buy some organic bananas if they want to, right? That's true for most Americans, but not true for millions of Americans, millions of Minnesotans. So that's the work that has to continue, and probably will through certainly my lifetime. But I'm getting pretty old, so all of our lifetimes and then beyond.
You mentioned that Second Harvest is sort of an umbrella distributor for food shelves.
Yeah.
In December, when the ice surge first started in Minnesota, I volunteered at Manna Market that was connected through the DHH church in South Minneapolis. A pastor made this connection. And do you know if Manna Market is also connected to Second Harvest?
I don't. Second Harvest has over 1,000 points of distribution themselves. So the list is really long, and I'm not sure. And not all hunger relief organizations, large and small, use Second Harvest as their main source. There's another terrific organization called the Food Group, here in the Twin Cities, that is a wholesaler as well. My food shelf uses both. Second Harvest just happens to be the largest one, and was the one that I worked at for about 7 years as this work really kind of took off. Because before that, at General Mills, I remember a quick story. One of our executives went to Walmart down in Arkansas. He came back and said, we got to get into something called sustainability. And we all thought, and it was kind of like, well, okay, well, what does this even mean? And everyone kind of thought, well, maybe that's building energy. Like, we talking about solar panels, or are they gonna, is grocery going to turn into more of a more viable economic entity by being more energy efficient? Well, come to discover that really what it means is, in the food industry, is incredibly broad, not the least of which is, like, General Mills turned to, which was around food waste.
When you want to say more about that? How does reducing food waste actually help fight hunger?
Well, reducing food waste does, there's incredible value to reducing food waste. I mean, well, let me put it this way. One of the things that you discover quickly in the corporate world is waste reduction is margin improvement. And for those that are listening that aren't necessarily attuned to what that means. If you sell a box of Cheerios, you can improve the percentage of profit on that box of Cheerios by reducing the waste that is created in making that box of Cheerios. That's a good thing for the company and a good thing for the shareholders. One quick story that I heard, I wasn't involved, but being in that position I was in, an engineer discovered that every night in the Cheerios plant, there's an enormous amount of dust that was created from the baking and the boxing of Cheerios. And that dust was basically money on the floor, if you think
Hmm.
about it, because it's product. It's just microscopic product that has blown through the air. And what they discovered was if they were to capture that waste, that dust, they could actually put it back into the front end of the manufacturing
Oh,
and
wow.
not lose those sugar and oats and other additives that went into it and didn't get swept away. So that's a on the corporate side, sustainability can be a tremendous shareholder value.
I was just going to say, I'm going to equate that to like if I'm making homemade bread and I flour my counter. So
Yeah.
when I'm kneading it, and then I scrape that flour back into the flour container.
That's exactly right. Instead of just simply pushing it into the sink, you're like, well, hold it. There's that literally is my dollars I'm about to flush down the sink. But you do that over the course of hundreds of millions of boxes of Cheerios.
Right.
It
Much
adds
larger scale.
thousands and thousands of tons of sugar and oats and things that were grown, harvested with diesel trucks driven across the country to our, so it's an easy story to tell. And it was really easy for everyone in the industry, from the food manufacturers to the retailers to the restaurants, to all kind of go, yeah, okay, we're on board. We can talk about the environmental positivity there. You don't have to grow as much sugar. You don't have to use as much water. All those good things. You can talk about the hunger relief stuff, the social stuff, which is awesome as well. But the bottom line is you're a company, you're in business. So we got to show that the investment in the personnel that, like myself, that were working on it, that there's something to be had here. So anyways, long story short, sustainability and food waste mitigation in the long term continues to make a ton of sense. And then when I started working hunger relief, you see that it can have an immediate impact on families and on kids. Every kid in this country should have access to a good tasting, nutritious piece of fruit all the time.
Yes.
And, even I've put back a bag of apples because when I weigh them and see the cost, I'm like, I'm not paying that much for basically what turns out to be 8 apples. And I can afford it. And then I think of that with a family of 4 or 5 who can't and maybe never will. So anyway, that's
Yeah.
part of the whole story.
Yeah, we actually are interviewing Heather Keeler, who is, I can't remember the name of the district, but basically it's like Detroit Lakes, and it's, what is it, Monica? Like the whole western side of Minnesota is her
It's a,
district. She is
it's
fish
another
She's
big
up
box.
there.
district. Yeah.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I talked about with her chief of staff the other day were food deserts in
Yeah.
her district, where
Hmm.
you can't get fresh produce,
Right.
and
Right.
your only access to groceries are Dollar General. So
Right.
it's just it's a problem that's very pervasive. And I think
Right.
people who live in the Twin Cities, we take for granted the fact that, like, we just had a brand new Colburn's that opened up today, and Monica
Yeah.
was there, and
Right by you guys. Right. Right. Right.
love Coburn's, right?
Right.
But we also have a Hy-Vee that is like less than a mile and a half from our house. And we have a Super Target and we have a Super Walmart that are all within 3 miles of our house,
Yeah.
where we can go buy an apple if we want an apple. And
Hmm.
not
If you want
everyone
an apple,
has
or
that.
it gives that. Yeah. Exactly. It's the food access is that's like a whole nother channel of issues, right? That's a whole nother story, but it is part
Yes.
of the same overall, which is we have enough food. we struggle to find ways of getting it to those 20% of the population that just can't afford it, or a lot of reasons. And so we have things like Meals on Wheels, and we have food shelves, and we have government subsidies, and all the things that are necessary to keep our population as healthy as possible. And for me, of course, a big part of this as well is knowing that if you don't feed them proper food today, the health costs for those individuals will continue to be tremendously bad tomorrow.
Right.
And so it's a constant investment. And you can talk to politicians about that, and they understand, but they are living in such a short-sighted world that they like, yeah, that's bad.
Yeah. So, Bob, one of the reasons I reached out to you is because I follow you on social media because you're awesome. And what I was noticing during the immediate ice occupation, that you were kind of pissed that they closed McDonald's down in Eden
Yeah,
Prairie.
it really,
And
yeah,
yeah, and as someone who follows you online, I noticed that you spend a lot of time now highlighting local restaurants and neighborhood businesses and encouraging people to support them. So, in light of knowing that you probably had friends, knowing who you are, you probably had friends at McDonald's who knew your coffee order every day when
yeah.
you went in
It
there,
is kind of
right?
one of those things where, and it was the McDonald's incident here in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, right? Southwest suburb, very, um, generally, I mean, a fabulous place to live and raise kids and schools and everything. And because decided to stake out the Eden Prairie Mall and kind of hide in the McDonald's parking lot and grab cooks when they were going in, they decided to just close the internal, and they still did drive through, and I'm sure they were trying to. I don't know how they got their staff in to do even drive through. It just really struck me.
Yeah,
Now the result of that hasn't been to go to McDonald's around the cities. It's to think and to pay attention to the community of what's happening in the areas that are even had even greater impact, right?
right.
So the Lake Street area and Powderhorn Park and Linden Hills and areas that there was a little bit more up close and personal. You can see during the surge, you could definitely see, because I did it one day. I went out and was looking for them, and I was on like a lot of people. I was on a
Monica
Signal.
does that.
on
Yeah,
Signal, on a
Yeah.
Signal group. I got invited in by a terrific Hispanic citizen friend of mine, and just and following along and watching them watch ice and follow ice. I went out and did it myself one day.
Hmm.
A long story short, the McDonald's thing really triggered me. Yeah, I started to pay more attention, and then fortunately, things did turn for the better. They reduced the impact. Now they're even stopping it. They don't want to talk about it as mass deportations anymore because they know they've lost the narrative in
right.
DC. But still, these businesses are down. Some are still closed and may never open again. But,
Yep.
their businesses are down 20, 30, 80, 90%. And it's like, all right, well, the very least I can do with the few followers I have is go out, break some bread, bring some friends occasionally, and not go to McDonald's, God bless them, but go to places like that are fantastic and that I never
And
would have
locally
thought
owned.
of looking up. Right. I went to Ninja Food Cake Cafe off of Minnetonka Boulevard, which is they were very anti-ice, and so it isn't necessarily the places that had the greatest impact of that ice, the damage they did, but it was places that stood up and made a
Right.
point. And this freaking place was awesome. And I thought, well, wait a minute, okay. So then I went to another one, and it's only been a half a dozen or so, but boy, it's a fun way for myself, selfishly, to try these places I never would have thought of going. Like,
Right.
hey, I'm going to drive to Powderhorn Park to look up a cafe. I'm a Starbucks guy. So. But now it's like, well, look, let's go support the community and do a little bit of as little as I have publicity about it. But and I just recalled But also, there was a story like on Care 11 and on and another one on WCCO that call out these places and say, hey, they're really hurting. Um,
Right.
yeah, because they lost a chef. There's a place by your mother-in-law and my mother's condo
Yeah.
called Cafe and Crumbs. And Cafe and Crumbs, a guy who's a restaurateur took a $200,000 loan out to open up this coffee shop on 85th. And one day ICE came in their civilian clothes, lured this chef outside, and he had legal he had a legal work permit, but
They
they
don't
don't
care.
care. They don't care.
No.
So they grabbed him and took him away. And now the chef is gone, and the other employees are afraid, and this guy closed the shop. Now, what does that mean? Well, one, this guy that was grabbed is traumatized. His family, I don't know about his family situation, but the guy had staff, and now the staff's out of a job. And the guy had a
Yeah.
$200,000 bank loan, and now he has no way of repaying that bank loan. And all it is to this administration, in particular Stephen Miller and that ilk, is a number against a quota, and it's disgusting. And it's like, I mean, that's where we are today. We won't be there forever, but it certainly feels like a forever in the moment. So that's been part of the for me the effort, and I'm hoping obviously that some of my friends and followers will do something similar. They may not put it on social media, but they're like, instead of going here to Chuck E. Cheese, we're gonna go over here where we would not necessarily look to. So that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And lest people think that the ice surge is done, it's
Yeah.
not.
It's
The
no.
signal chats I'm still following, there are still patrollers that are going to restaurants and, where there are clusters of restaurants around closing time, because that's when ICE is present to get people when they're coming off of their shifts.
Right.
And yes, go support immigrant owned restaurants 100%.
Yeah.
We had a restaurant, a beloved restaurant. Actually, Monica was particularly attached to it because it's where all the teachers would go for a happy hour up here in Maple Grove that is closed.
Close.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's embarrassing. It's an
It
embarrassing time,
is.
country. And
And it's disgraceful. More than it being embarrassing, it's disgraceful.
it is
that-
disgraceful, and it's just about hurting as many people as they can. It is really that simple. When I talk to my Republican friends, the few that I maintain and by the way, I am a reformed Republican. I
Same.
spent my whole life as a conservative. I'm still a conservative, but this has nothing to do with conservatism. All this is a way of, it's basically bigotry. It's
Yes.
just really cuts to the core of black and brown people are less than in this world, and
Yeah.
it has nothing to do with conservative politics. It has everything to do with Trumpism, and I'm sure we all on this podcast feel the same way. I am deeply surprised at how pervasive it is. You always assume there's a minority, but a smaller minority that's involved or not involved, but supportive, and it's a bigger piece of America than I realized.
Same.
It's just
Same.
really surprising.
It was heartening to see Tom Tillis call out Kristi Noem for exactly what you mentioned before about the numbers.
Absolutely.
Because it is all about the numbers. It's the numbers that
That's all
Stephen
it
Miller
is.
has come down with, and
Yeah.
that's not what he told us it was going to be.
No, and that's all it is.
Shocker that he
Yeah.
lied.
It backfired, and now they're not calling it that anymore. Now it's not mass deportations because
Right.
that we are. But you're right. They're out there still. My signal group did close down.
Oh.
My Prairie Chan has someone. Yeah.
Oh,
But yeah, I know it's still happening. I was reminded by a friend. Yeah, don't assume that this is gone just because there's instead of 3,000 ICE agents, there's only 650.
Well,
Right.
and they've moved outstate, and frankly, I think that Mark Wayne Mullen potentially could be worse than Kristi Noem.
In a lot
That's
of
a
ways.
scary
to be
thought.
honest.
Yeah, in a lot
Yeah.
of ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
So,
it's
Certainly not much
TBD.
different.
But
no.
if the Democrats can grab the House, that will dramatically change the tone because then investigations into Christine O's perjury and Pam Bondi's perjury and the spending going on and the funneling money to their friends. Let alone, I mean, Trump seems to be above the fray in terms of accountability, but you can pick off his lieutenants and make their lives
Absolutely.
miserable to the point of slowing down the damage that they're doing in our area.
I want to see Stephen Miller in a fucking orange jumpsuit for the rest of his life once this
Yeah,
is over.
I want
yeah,
to see him in an orange jumpsuit underground.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Same.
so Bob, for people who might not immediately see the connection, how and why do immigration policies end up having a big impact on local economies and small businesses?
Well, a couple of things happen. The primary one is the fear factor, which was part of the strategy, and this ties back to the earlier topic around food insecurity, in that people chose, and you literally could see it in the places that I spend my days, a reduction in people. And then you look around and you notice that it's people of color or people or immigrants, the Somali community here in Eden Prairie, probably the Liberian community up in closer to Maple Grove, and the Somali community up there as well. And so there's a reduction in spending that immediately takes place, just general economic spending. The other part of it that I'm sure people are generally aware of is on the economics of running a business and not having staff, or simply not having enough staff because you need 45 and you're down to 36, and because 9 are afraid to come in, and or you're a farmer and you need to harvest, and you found that even though you're in a red state, that you just don't have the same folks with A1 visas coming in because they don't feel like or that are here, they don't feel like they're gonna be able to stop being chased through a field, which was happening earlier this past year, where they were
Yeah.
literally chasing migrants who
In
were
California.
harvesting
Yeah.
Yeah.
through fields. And so the economic impact of basically having a healthy business, because you need a certain base level of people to run that business, like I said, whether it's a farm or, as we have talked about to some extent, a restaurant, and everything in between. For fun, part time, I work in a bike shop, and there is a 4 or 5 Hispanic people that do the janitorial work, and all of a sudden there's 2. They pay taxes, they get a check, they do all the things right. Whether they're here legally or not, they're cleaning the bathrooms, they're picking up the trash,
They're
right?
doing jobs for lower pay
They're doing
that
jobs, working
no
50
one else
hours.
wants to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So there is an impact, there. So I mean, so the economic impact is really on the supply side, which is that workforce, labor force, and the demand side, which is people are spending less money because there are few people out there earning money to spend or are afraid to go out and spend it.
Yeah.
So when you step back and look at all of this, food systems, small businesses, immigration, community networks, can you leave us with some hope? What's giving you hope right now?
Oh, yeah. Well,
Hope in the hen house.
I do
Hope in the
think,
hen
yeah.
house.
I mean, that sense of doom of 3 months ago is fading, because the light at the end of the tunnel for me, it did start with Greg Bovino being demoted and moved back to his district in California, and
That
hopefully
hairy-footed hobgoblin is gone.
he will be indicted here in Hennepin County in the next 6 months, and we will all celebrate and have parades when he is in an orange jumpsuit.
I got to interject. I was outside the hotel in Maple Grove for his grand send off the night before he left.
I was about to say that. I'm like, Monica got to give him a great bon
Huge
voyage.
I
devil.
did, yes.
So So having that change is lifted, hopefully for everyone in the studio, at least a little bit of that daily dread, that sleepless night dread. And then the fact is, I am very comfortable saying that the Trump administration does not have the intelligence to screw up the election in the fall. We know he wants to, and yes, the SAVE Act, which is not going to pass, would create the chaos that they're looking for, where they can say, hey, we got to keep this open, or they get their friendly judges to order them closed early, or all the chaos they want to foment to call into question the legitimacy of any given polling place. So I'm comfortable they just simply don't have the intellectual heft to pull off disrupting it to the point where it will change the inevitable outcome, which is that the House is going to turn Democratic,
Potentially the Senate.
that the
There's
Senate has
hope.
a chance to. Somebody like Talrico in California, in Texas,
Yes.
has a legitimate shot for the first time in 30 years to win the Senate seat in Texas. But once the Democrats are in charge of the House, then just so much changes, which I know not everyone can appreciate, but you change the speaker, you change the committee chairs.
The
You,
speaker who might
you,
actually know what's going on once in a while.
yeah,
Exactly.
you will get to, instead of anyways, a lot will change.
Yeah.
Not the least of which, and I said it before, I'll be redundant, is they will be able to begin investigations that will eat up an enormous amount of what little intellectual capacity Pete Hegseth and the Vinos have, and that will slow down and derail much of this. The damage has been done. It'll still take us
Yeah.
a long while to
We were
recover.
saying decades. We think it's going to take decades to
Well,
recover
in
from
it
some,
will.
this.
in some, I'm more optimistic than that. In some ways, it will. But when you have great leadership like Mark Carney in Canada showing how to do it and how to pivot away from America, and all those southern state businesses that had lost their contracts to Canada,
Yep.
to Canadian businesses people will start coming around like, hey, could we open up this market again? And, we're so sorry. And, stuff like that I feel like should repair itself. It'll take years, but it'll improve. But like any little Napoleon, when you're shooting to be the autocrat that Trump wishes he could be, you diminish the trust in institutions to the point where you can't believe your doctor anymore. You can't believe the professor who studied for 40 years a given topic. You don't trust the financial. You just lose trust in institutions. That's what's going to take generations to change. Is you have to be able
Yes.
to trust, and we've lost trust.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, Bob, this has been a really cool conversation because it's allowed me to peek into a side of your life I've never had the opportunity to witness firsthand. I mean, it's family gatherings, we don't talk about stuff like this.
No.
So it's really been a pleasure and a great opportunity for me to be
Yeah,
able to
hopefully
do that
people
with you.
find it mildly interesting.
For sure.
I thought it was fascinating. Like, I didn't
Yeah.
know any of that stuff about food waste. I did not know that they were collecting Cheerio dust to help,
Right?
mitigate food
Yeah.
waste. Who knew? Who knew?
Yeah.
One of the things that I take away from your work is so many of the systems that shape our communities, food access, local businesses, economic opportunity, and how deeply interconnected they are.
Yeah.
And understanding those connections helps us make better decisions about policies and priorities that affect our daily lives, including who we're going to vote for in November,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
You bet.
It's
You
also a
bet.
great
So,
reminder that supporting our communities doesn't always have to be complicated. Sometimes it's
It
as
is
simple
not.
as
Yeah.
show up for that local restaurant,
Show up for the local
volunteer at a
restaurant.
food shelf.
It's not hard. It's not expensive. Whatever you can do, every little bit helps.
yes.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us today, Bob.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah.
Listeners, if you are finding meaning in the stories we're sharing, if something moves you, challenges you, makes you see the world a little differently, please like, comment, and share. Helps more than you know.
And follow us everywhere at The Politics Chicks on Substack, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.
Thanks all for being a part of our community and keep shining your light so we can find each other in the dark.
And remember, we're stronger together. Thank you, Bob. I really appreciate it.
Yes.
Thanks,
Thanks so
Bob.
much, guys.